Voilà, un objet un peu futuriste. Pourquoi je l'ai choisi comme coup de cœur? Parce que c'est évidemment du numérique et du virtuel, mais que la logique est de le mettre au sein même du musée. Et quelque part, hein, ça montre que la frontière entre réel et virtuel ou entre physique et numérique n'a plus beaucoup de sens, avec en plus la notion et le concept que je trouve très intéressant de pouvoir faire voyager cette exposition, ce musée virtuel dans le monde entier, mais pas seulement avec de l'Internet, mais toujours avec une expérience du visiteur. Donc ce musée Victoria va pouvoir comme ça se promener dans le monde avec ses collections. En fait, j'ai juste besoin de la présentation. Okay. Donc voilà. Donc comme je vous le disais, nous avons de la chance parce que l'Eurostar était à l'heure aujourd'hui. Et j'ai le plaisir d'accueillir Chris Michaels. Comme chaque année, nous invitons un musée européen. Il y a 2 ans, c'était Zurich. L'année dernière, c'était la Tate. Donc cette année, nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir le British Museum et son directeur des activités numériques, Chris Michaels.
Bonjour. I will give my presentation in English, although my slides are in French. So I will try and speak slowly. The story I'm going to tell today is about what the museum means in digital and what digital means for the museum. My role as head of digital for the British Museum is to lead a transformation, a historic transformation, and a once-in-a-lifetime transformation of the museum from being a physical place to being a digitally connected place. That story is one that will take us the next 30 years to tell in its completion. But I'm going to start by talking about the vision of what digital means for us at the British Museum. So, our vision is about going back to the 1750s. When the museum was founded in 1754, it was founded on a great Enlightenment dream. That dream was about being a place, a universal place, where the whole world could come and experience the whole history of mankind all under one roof. That was a great dream in the 18th century, but it was not a possible dream. And my job and the job of digital at the museum is to make that dream possible, that possible dream come true. So we're going on a journey in the next 5 years, which will start to make the possibility of digital, to take that possibility of talking to the whole world about the history of the whole world come true. That's a journey that, as I said, will take until 2030. That's because it will take until 2030 for the whole world to have access to the internet. But at that time, when the whole world can access the history of the world online, it's our job and our responsibility to tell that story to the whole world. So if I look back, the difference in what that's going to mean for the amount of people we can talk to is significant. Back in 1759, when we were the first holder of the collection from Hans Sloane and one of those great first museums for the world, where people could come and experience the world, it was only 5,000 people per year who could come. They would send a letter in advance, they would be sent a ticket through the post, they would turn up at the door, they would give their ticket to the housekeeper, Mary Bygrave. Mary Bygrave would lead them around this amazing collection of historical sculptures, of animal bones, of pieces of natural history, of Hans Sloane's books, and then she would lead them out the door at the other end and wave them on their way. And she wouldn't accept a tip because she wasn't allowed to. 5,000 people is not the whole of mankind. As I look today, in 2013, we welcomed 6.8 million people through the door at the British Museum, a phenomenal, phenomenal number, only bettered by the Louvre in the whole world. Alongside that, 15 million people used our websites. Another 30 or 40 million people access the TV programs, the books, the other media that we create around the world. Again, these are phenomenal numbers, and in a year where Night at the Museum 3, the Hollywood movie, was set at the museum, we access enormous amounts of people through our media projects. Again, it is not the whole world. So our journey for the next over the period to 2030 is to work out how to talk to the whole world about the history of the whole world. We're starting that with a 5-year project that we began 2 weeks ago today, and it's the story of that project that I'm going to tell you today. What are we doing? What are the things that's going to matter as we think strategically about the future of digital? For me, that comes to three things that all begin with R. In French, they are P and two R's, so I apologize for the change. The first of them is fundamentally about that question of reach. How can I talk to the most number of people possible? What are the things that audience at the biggest scale possible want to hear from us? What's the stories we need to tell that reach that sizable audience? Alongside that, it's about relationships. I don't come from a museums background. I was a CEO of a mobile apps company before I came here. I've worked in TV, I've worked in books. One of the things I found quite astonishing as I came into the museum for the first time, the museum space for the first time, was how little we knew about those 7 million people who walked through the door. Often they come in, we welcome them in, we give them an amazing experience, but we know no more about them by the time they leave than we did before they came. That's often the same as we think about our relationships to them in the different media we create. TV does not teach you very great things about the audience who watches those TV programs. Books don't teach you very great things about the audience that read those books. It is, I believe, our responsibility as a museum to deeply understand our audience, and not only to understand them, but to work with them in the creation of the content, products and services we create. And so for me, simply, a very core part of my task and my team's task is to build relationships with our audience. That will come in two separate core metrics. One, what is the size of the database, the email addresses, the insights into our audience that we can build? Two, and fundamentally, what is the size of the social media audience that we can build alongside that? That creation of a deeper, meaningful, digital-based relationship with an audience will fundamentally change the things we understand and the things we do as we go forward. The third of my core metrics is about money. Museums all need more money than they have now, and as economic circumstances change, we will keep on needing more money. I believe that through the things we do in digital, we can make more money for the museum, and I take it as a very fundamental part of my role to do that. Through those three core metrics, I will judge, and the museum will judge with me, the success of what we do in the next 5 years. And I want that strategic simplicity to be a fundamental part of it, because everybody, whether they understand what you do in digital or not, can understand those notions of reach, of relationships and of revenue. And fundamentally, if we can do that, we can bring everyone on the journey with us. So what are the core things that we're going to work on from an operational point of view that will help to bring that mission and that vision alive? Again, simply for me, this is about three things and their role in changing the museum. The first is about the role of mobile, and I'll talk much more about this as we go through. To me, mobile changes utterly the relationship between a museum and its audiences. Changes it in a fundamental way that hasn't been changed before in the entire life of the museum industry of the last 250 years. Second is about social media and its power to enable us to tell our stories at scale. And really understanding and taking the social media opportunity, I think, is a fundamental thing for us all in this sector in the years ahead. The third, while it may seem more invisible, actually may be the most important of all of these, which is about the role of data. Again, as museums, we understand relatively little about our audiences and their relationships to us, but we have and we create extremely complex relationships with our audiences every day. Only by understanding the data that generates and how it fits together will we come to a point where we can make the right decisions about what really gets museums to evolve in the digital space. And so that investment in big data, the time, the people, the money, the activity that understands that, to me, fundamentally, that's about what I'm doing. Because I think by bringing data into museums, you will fundamentally change the culture of museums themselves. So what is a museum? I don't come from the museum space, so whilst the museums should and do think about themselves as being collections first and everything else second, actually, if I look at it a different way, a museum is a complex system of services that it operates. Often, we are, as the management of museums, we run very, very, very complex operations, actually on very small numbers of people. If I look at what the British Museum does, I think it does broadly about 12 core activities. We run social media activities. It's not a small thing in and of itself. We run websites, 37 websites in our portfolio. We run email marketing databases, 17 different email marketing databases across the museum. We run shops. We have 5 retail shops in the museum, each with a very differentiated offer. We run box office that allows you to buy tickets online, on your phone, through phone calls or walking up to a desk in our great court. Again, complex operation. We run 3 different e-commerce services. We make TV programs. We publish books. We run a collection site that we were talking about that gives access to 3 million objects and the academic information around them to the world. We run research programs. We have 31 different research programs taking place at the moment at the British Museum. We create mobile tours for our galleries. We create digital media in those galleries. We do interpretation and the intellectual content that explains our collection to the world. We run a membership service with 82,000 members. We run an events business. We run an education services business. We run a visitor services business. We run a customer services business. That's all done from a core staff of 400 people. And 100 of those people are curators. So we are running a very complex operation, trying to do all those things amazingly well. The challenge for me as I come in is if I look for a member of the audience in that list, I find it very hard to track one member of that audience from one of those areas of activity to the next. If I try and identify who is on our social media profiles, who is then also watching our TV programs, who is then also using our mobile tours, I cannot find that audience member. That means that we do not have a holistic picture of truly what takes place in the museum and the way everyone connects with us. On a practical level, it means we're often doing the same thing twice. That our marketing teams are developing relationships with their audience that then have to be duplicated by our membership services team. That our visitor services team don't know who's asking them a question in the museum, who might actually be someone who's already on our email database. From a measure of practical efficiency, it is an inefficient way to run an operation. It also means that the opportunity to have people have a genuine lifelong experience with us becomes very fragmented. And I believe with a collection as amazing as the British Museum's, a fundamental collection of the things that mankind has done since it first came into being, we should be able to tell that story to people in very integrated ways. And today, we cannot do that. So that is what we're going to change. Now, I don't know if the word omnichannel translates well into French. It is multicanal here. But a notion in digital media of omnichannel is how you connect all of these things together to create a continuous experience for people. That is fundamentally what I'm doing at the British Museum, is to connect all of our activities together so that if one human being comes into contact with one of our offers or services, we can offer them a continuous experience across all of the things that we do. I believe that is fundamentally important. I believe it maps also well to what is taking place in the broader digital media marketplace, because it gives us then ways to synergize and synchronize with what other organizations are doing. If I look at the retail space, if I look at the media space, those organizations are trying to become omni-channel businesses, and so it gives us a chance to do what other people are doing at a time when they are doing it and investing in it. I think, though, that fundamentally changes the museum, and it's understanding the impacts of that change that we will do in the next 5 years. So that's where we're going to. The question as we approach that is, where do we start? For me, I start, as I say, with the mobile phone. The iPhone, when it was invented in 2007, to me fundamentally changed the museum sector, but it's taken till 2014, 2015 for the beginnings of that impact to be felt. Simply put, a museum services the audience who come to the museum and the audience who never come to the museum. That audience who never come to the museum is a huge audience. That is our hundreds of millions and billions of people. But what mobile technology does is collapse the boundary between those two audiences. It means that fundamentally the audience that consume our social media content on Facebook, who will live all around the world, who will never come here, can have the same structure of experience as the audience who comes through the door, who bring these amazing supercomputers with them, and who can have their experience of the museum shaped by the mobile technology that they bring with them. I believe that's the first time that kind of connection between an audience who will never come and the audience that is there has ever happened, and it will change the shape of the experience that we offer to people in the years ahead fundamentally. To me, I start by thinking about that, and my colleague Laura is here today, who has responsibility for doing this, who is also French, who will help me if I get confused later. I start that question by thinking about what does the audience who does come do before they come to the museum. If I look at our metrics, if I look at the data that we have and try and help myself to understand it, fundamentally I get two chances to get my audience to do what I want them to do. If I look at our web data, an audience looks at our website once, twice before they come. Once wherever they live, twice when they're in London. To me, that gives me two chances to get them to structure their experience with the British Museum in a way that is meaningful to them and meaningful to us. I can tell that right now it doesn't work properly because every day hundreds of people stand outside our gates before we are open. That means they haven't got the experience they need from our website to make sure that they know what time the British Museum opens in the morning. That's a fundamental thing. The museum is actually not that easy to find unless you know London fairly well. So I think starting by that question of taking the opportunity to help the audience help themselves is really where we should begin as we think about a new digital experience for the museum. Coming into the museum, I believe the technology market is at a point where we can now help people to really help themselves in the museum space. Over the last couple of years, the museum has started to do interesting work with Google, with Apple, with many other providers in the technology space for starting to think in what happens for real-time navigation for the museum. Very importantly, we have to recognise that for anyone who has been to the British Museum, it is a very confusing place. There are 81 public galleries spread over a space of 7 acres. I, who work there, get lost all the time. So how do we expect the people who do not work there, who come in only once in their lifetime, to find their way around? We offer navigation tools in 11 different languages. We have things available to us, but none of those are as good as real-time data can help us with. We have all, I think, been on the journey in the last 10 years where we began with maps in our cars. We used those maps and sometimes we got lost and sometimes we didn't. Almost universally, we have abandoned that for GPS. There's a simple reason, is that GPS is better than a physical paper map. It may not be as accurate data that goes into it, but it is simply more helpful on a moment-by-moment basis. Within the next 12 months, Apple in particular will have the technology publicly available, and this is no secret, for indoor real-time positioning around data, so that you can see. I have walked up the stairs in the British Museum, holding my phone in my hand, with the blue dot following me up the stairs as I go. That is a very useful thing, and it means that as we plot information into that data space, people can start to help themselves in ways they never did before. It means as an employee, I might get asked less often than I do, which is about 10 times a week, where is the Cypriot Sculpture Gallery? Where are the mummies? When I started, I didn't know. It was very embarrassing. And if people can truly help themselves in that situation, they will have a better time in the museum, and we will help them to understand our collections better. I think there's been a tendency sometimes in the museum sector to view being lost as an existential experience. That being lost in the museum somehow is a kind of philosophical moment to connect to the world. I can see some of the value in that, but I do not genuinely believe it is true. And helping people to help themselves, I think, is fundamentally one of the tasks we should take on. Alongside that, as we start to think about the growth of our mobile experiences, we have to start to think how to introduce awe and wonder to our audiences. A core part of the British Museum collection, and this is something we've already been doing, is the Parthenon. That Parthenon, that incredible story about Greek mythology and Greek history that it tells, is a very complicated object to understand. Only 30% of the original sculpture sits in the British Museum's gallery, so that a continuous narrative is not entirely told by it. It is in a state of relative physical decay. But yet here are some of the most beautiful, incredible sculptures ever done by mankind that fundamentally shaped how the representation of human beings takes place in Western art. We have to help all of our audiences understand that. One of the ways we've begun that process is through our partnership with Samsung on what we call the Samsung Digital Discovery Centre. That creates a context and a set of tools whereby our young audiences, school children between the ages of 5 and 11, can come into our museum space and have a technology-enabled experience to help them understand the story of these things. Last year, in partnership with a company called Gamar, who make fantastic augmented reality apps, we created an app that helps that school's audience to understand the Parthenon sculptures. It takes them through a game-based experience that allows them to hold their devices up and understand a little part of the story told in that sculpture through a cartoon-driven game-like experience. I think that's fundamentally important because we want, and we all do want who work in this sector, the historic and cultural value of these incredible objects to pertain as the world changes very fundamentally around us. We have to help people into that process for the first time. I am taking my son, who's 6, to see this gallery in 2 weeks' time. I would say he is an intelligent boy, but I would say if I do not give him some help in understanding those sculptures, he may take nothing from that experience. I want him to value what the Parthenon can be, and I want all children to value those. And I believe, again, that mobile technology can help in understanding and telling the story to that audience. Beyond that process, and we will create apps for many of our galleries that do different things for different historic contexts. Ultimately, the biggest thing for us in this space is helping the audience to curate their own experience. Last year, we ran a series of public lectures called The Museum of the Future. One of those debated a question around what digital means for the museum space. We had fantastic participants from Google, an architect, one of the government's great scientific advisors, but the most interesting part for me of the dialogue they had was where the architect, David Chipperfield, asked a question about how do we curate the present. It's a big, significant question. Amit Sood, who runs the Google Cultural Institute, who is a friend and partner in the space, answers simply, the audience curates the present all the time on their mobile phones. They do it millions of times a day. And whilst that is a different answer to the question from the one I think David Chipperfield asked, I think it's part of what we have to think about for how we adapt the space. Simply put, if I go into the museum today, of the 25,000 people who come per day, 5,000, 10,000 people are having social media curation experiences every day in the British Museum. They take photos of themselves outside the door. They take photos of themselves standing on statues. They encourage their children, which we do not wish they did, to sit on top of our Egyptian statues and have a photo taken on them. They are doing that. And if we do not participate in that process with them, the actual interpretive meaning of the experience they're having with an object will be lost. So fundamentally for me, we as a museum have to engage with the social media that people are using. That means understanding what the audience does with Instagram and participating in their experience with Instagram. It means enabling new technologies. On the second column, the app at the top is a thing called 123D Catch. This is a fantastic technology for people to make their own 3D scans from objects, simply by taking photos on their mobile phone. Amazing, amazing piece of technology. It is a chance for us to help people understand the objects in our collection better by enabling them to engage with those collections through social media technology. And I think we have to go on that journey of change with them, because if we don't, again, art objects in museums just become background. They become wallpaper. So this, for me, is one of the fundamental things that has started to happen in the last 2 years in the museum space. Selfies are, I think, the most important thing that have happened in the world in the last 20 years. They're a chance for the world to tell its story at scale to the whole world. The museum sector is starting to see this come in, and I think we ought to embrace this as a positive thing and genuinely embrace what it can mean. The hashtag museum selfie is one that's become more and more prevalent in the last 2 years. And again, I think it is significantly meaningful for what a museum can be, because it asks the audience to question their relationship with an object at a point where they are in physical proximity to that object. Fundamentally, what is a museum except a human being coming into contact with an object in a physical space? That is ultimately what we do. So finding the place where the record of that experience can be created and shared, I think, is a valuable and noble thing to do. I think it also helps us as we shape people's storytelling experience and that to understand their relationship to the object. If I look at the example on the left of the two ladies dancing with the statue, that's a funny, silly thing. But actually, some sculpture questions anatomy in a way where you start to do physically impossible things. If I looked at our Germany exhibition, the famous painting of Goethe in it actually is anatomically impossible. So asking people to take selfies of themselves with anatomically impossible things starts to get them to question how artists have questioned the relationship of the human body between the real and the ideal. I think we can actually do complex and sophisticated intellectual things with this that actually to people seem like fun. And between those two things, that deep education in the philosophical value of things and the simple things of enabling people to have an entertaining time in a museum, I think there's lots of experience that can come out of it. I think also simply it buys people's goodwill. They feel that they can do something they want to do in a museum space in a way they've never done it before. So it deepens our instant relationship with people. We will see more and more of this in the museum sector in the next year. The 21st of January was a moment which was World Museum Selfie Day. Not enough museums participated in that. We need to start changing that over the months and years ahead. The next thing here, and do I have access to the video that's attached to this? Okay. So in October last year, a very smart young guy who works for me came to me and asked a question about whether he could do something. He asked me if he thought it would be a good idea to build the British Museum in Minecraft. Being someone who's far too busy to think about some things in detail sometimes, I just said, yes, that sounds like a great idea. The next day, he put a post onto Reddit asking if anyone would like to help. Within a day, 1,000 people had volunteered to help in that process, and we had appeared on the BBC News the next evening. I think it's very interesting, and if we can show the video of what we started to do, we will, because it's a moment where the incredible social technology that exists out there, such as Minecraft, a game which has 55 million users and is used by children and adults all around the world, can start to change, enable people to engage very differently with what the British Museum is. So we have built the British Museum in Minecraft in the last 4 months. It was very, very technically difficult. There are millions of bricks. The roof was as complicated to build in virtual space as it was in real life. But what it has done is enable people to think about the museum in a different way. Before and generally, we talk about the museum in terms of its collection or its exhibitions. Actually, this is a chance for people to think about the physical location of the museum and how they can interact and play with it. Never before has that really been possible. We don't give away architectural maps of the museum. We do relatively little in helping people to understand that place. But giving people a chance to play with the physical construction of the museum, I think is, again, a significant moment to see that museums can mean different things to many, many different audiences. From a value perspective, for me, simply this is a way to start, again, that young audience who may find in their educational lives that they understand less about history and art than they may have done in previous generations, to take the British Museum as an object with meaning and find their own path to it, and be able to interact with it through their own behaviours and technologies. That's something that goes from a casual idea actually to a programme of education and evolution that takes place over time. In the next months, we will launch an initiative where each week a new gallery, the objects in that gallery will be built by our audiences. So whether that's our room, our Egyptian sculptures galleries, whether that's the mummies, whichever those bits are, whether that's Middle Eastern art, let the audience build that stuff in Minecraft and experience for itself a little bit of the process of fabrication that goes into these incredible objects. Fundamentally, I think it also makes the museum a place of play and proves the kind of resilience of a place like the British Museum over time in history. One of the things I've said to our directors is, whatever we do in digital, we are not going to break the museum. The museum, which has lasted 275 years, those phenomenal objects right back to the first African hand axes from 100,000 years ago, some people messing around on the internet trying to do amazing things are not going to destroy the value of that. So I think this is a chance for us to view the audience and its relationship to us with confidence, that they can play and experiment, they can do amazing things that change the perception of the museum and its relationship to its audience, but they will not break the historic meaning of it. In fact, I believe they can enhance that meaning significantly.
You want to see?
Let's see. So let's see what we've been doing. those that don't know, the gentleman featured at the end is Neil McGregor, Director of the British Museum, who did lay the first brick. The core, I have a few more slides to go. The core of this is really that last sentence. The museum of the world, for the world, built by the world. Because in a way, I think that starts to tell the story of really, again, what digital can mean as we think of it at scale. Inviting the audience through the door, almost for the first time, to be participants in the creation of the museum of the future is fundamentally what we've been trying to do with this. And Minecraft is a first gesture and step along the path to that. I'll just talk about two more initiatives briefly before I close. So, as we understand in the fun space of Minecraft what the museum can mean, actually I think there's a broader and possibly deeper space that we can operate in, which is around the question of open data. In the academic part of museums, the notion of linked data and the way that different academic content sits together is becoming an ever more important part of our lives. As a museum which displays 3 million objects currently in its accessible database, we know that that's a valuable thing to our academic audiences. A challenge that I put to the museum is what happens to the other audiences? What do other people want to do with this data about our collection? So working with a group called the Open Data Institute, founded by Tim Berners-Lee, who created the internet, we have worked on an initiative that will come to fruition this month, where we make our data sets publicly available for the first time, and we work in a broad initiative with app developers, with different startups, to see what they can make with our data sets, and see what they can make with our data sets in connection with other cultural heritage data sets. Part of the value for me here is not knowing what the outcome is going to be. I'm fascinated to see what commercial enterprises can do with our data once they've got it. Because part of, I think, the process of opening up to digital is simply that moment of saying, what can this be? Not knowing the answer, but letting other people shape the answer. And so opening up to that startup universe and helping them to help us, I think, is a very valuable thing to do. The last piece I'll talk about, and I believe Ben Marino, who's been a phenomenal part of our 3D experience over time, is here today, is around 3D scanning. We've done amazing things at the museum over time. CAT scanning, medical-based scanning of our objects. Incredible, phenomenal things that reveal incredible new truths about our collection. We can only do so many examples of that. And so for me, part of the process here is to open up that 3D scanning process to our audience. Again, with some of the amazing technologies out there now, such as 123D Catch made by Autodesk, it's a chance for the museum's audience to make 3D representations of our objects. They never would have been able to do that before 2-3 years ago. So it's a moment in time to embrace the opportunity of that, to not think that these are scans that the whole world will want to use as scientific representations of what we do, but they're part of people's engagement with it. In the next months, we'll run some public initiatives with that. And I think one of the interesting things is to find if other people want to participate. So if anyone would like to participate in one of our public scanning initiatives from their own museums, please do get in contact with Laura and I from this, because for me, the museum space as a whole stands enormously to benefit with an engagement with this social technology space, and we would love to work with you in doing that. In summary, to close this presentation, I would say simply, museums remain what they are at their heart, a chance to create a relationship between people and objects, and then to tell stories about the connection between those things. I believe digital can take the British Museum, and I believe it can take all museums to an entirely new scale as a result of that. I believe that the museum sector needs to work much more closely together to do that, and I believe that by doing that we can reaffirm our place in a very, very different and changing world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very exciting and stimulating presentation and perspective. And thanks also to how can I say this? To ask a French museum to join you for this 3D initiative. Do you have other fields of or digital tools or digital innovation where you think it could be helpful to work with other museums, and especially, of course, French museums?
I don't doubt that that every opportunity we take, there is a great and enhanced opportunity for participation between museums. As we try and work together, we are often trying to solve common problems, and we often have common challenges. Underneath our technologies in the museum sector generally need heavy evolution. our public programs generally can send the same message to the same audiences. So whether it's social media partnerships such as those for 3D scanning or any of those areas, I think there's huge opportunity for collaboration because we all have the same opportunity to scale the way we work with our audiences out there. Museums haven't collaborate in so many amazing ways around curation, around other things they do. Why not collaborate more deeply in the digital space as well?
Je vais peut-être demander, comment voulez-vous que l'on procède? On a à peu près une demi-heure maintenant pour un dialogue avec Chris. Est-ce que c'est bon en anglais ou est-ce qu'on demande à...
Peut-être me présenter.
Oui,
je m'appelle Laura, j'ai rejoint l'équipe de Chris il y a 2 semaines, mais je suis contente de traduire les questions si vous n'êtes pas très confiant en anglais.
Et éventuellement les réponses, mais ça va être plus long et on va pouvoir prendre moins de questions. J'ai une première question et après je laisse la parole à la salle. You have many projects, exciting projects with in different areas. How many people work in your team? Everybody will ask the same question. How many people, and can you give us what is the percentage of the total budget of British Museum which is allocated to digital? It's a very difficult question, I know.
I have just been through a process of rebuilding my team, and Laura is one of the first, is one of the faces. So Laura came from Amex and Capgemini beforehand, so bringing some of a phenomenal product management experience into the space for the first time to see what she can do to transform the space. My team is 22 people, including me. That team works across digital, 22, sorry, my English is fast. 22 people that work across mobile, social, TV and broadcast, and publishing. Of the budget, interesting question, 7.5%-ish.
And in pounds?
We are amongst friends?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
No social networks, nothing,
Yeah.
nothing outside this room. Yes.
Yeah. Growing towards about 8 million per year.
Okay, so 10 million euros.
Yeah.
Okay.
But much, please, not beyond these 4 walls. I will get sacked. Then we'll have to. This conversation
Okay,
is irrelevant.
Donc ne tweetez pas, s'il vous plaît. Questions, réactions, suggestions, propositions de coopération.
Merci. Pierre Croiset, GMT Édition. Je voulais savoir jusqu'à quel point vous autorisez l'usage des smartphones et des tablettes à l'intérieur de vos musées, à l'intérieur de vos expositions. Est-ce que vous permettez à tout le monde de prendre toutes les photos possibles, imaginables? Est-ce que vous offrez une couverture Wi-Fi? Est-ce qu'on peut partager des choses sur Facebook, etc. Jusqu'où vous allez dans cette politique?
So by the end of March, we will have installed Wi-Fi across the whole of the British Museum. To put that in context, that's 13.5 miles, 16 kilometres, 20 kilometres of cable that has had to be put through the building, and it's taken 7 months to put that cabling in. We will launch that Wi-Fi service from March, April time. We allow people to take photography throughout the public collection. We do not allow photography in the paid exhibitions, partly because of our relationships with lenders.
Colline.
Bonjour, Colline Onis du MUSEM à Marseille. Ce matin, on a évoqué la notion de droit à l'échec, qui est propre au numérique, en disant que les anglo-saxons avaient compris cet aspect des choses, contrairement aux Français qui seraient peut-être encore trop frileux là-dessus. Comment vous l'envisagez, ce droit à l'échec au British Museum?
Doing digital at the British Museum means changing a culture around digital. Failure is the core part of all digital behaviour. Every great digital business in the world has come through failing repeatedly, over and over again, to find the best path to success. From a management point of view, I believe very strongly in what's called a lean approach to management. That means simply You start with a vision of what you think is true, and you iterate relentlessly until you find out what is actually true. Failure is a core part of that. Museums are not alone in the world in having not behaved like that historically. Media companies, corporations, all are built not to fail, but they all do fail all the time. Where great digital companies, Google is an obvious example of this, but Amazon, but all those huge technology corporations, why they have succeeded in becoming organizations of such scale is by failing a lot. Everyone should read, and many people already have, Eric Ries's Lean Startup book. That's a story of a company that was failing and learnt to fail relentlessly to enable it to become a successful company. That same culture has to come into the museum. If I look statistically at the year ahead, I have 40 things I have promised the museum I will deliver, but I've told them only 25 of them will work. I think that's a decent fail rate. But we will, again, even that is a hypothesis, and we will find out the truth from doing it. If I hit 40, I'm a genius. If I hit 10, I'm an idiot. I'm prepared for both of those things to be true. But that cultural change ultimately has to come as part of that, because not everything will work. The thing is to get out of the things that don't work quickly.
In 2012, I think British Museum, you were not at the British Museum, did a partnership with BT to do VOD like a channel or platform. Mm-hmm. Is it a failure, or is it part of the failure?
Absolute failure. Amazing learning for the future, though, because it showed that we could distribute content to a different type of audience who've never seen that material before. It also showed that we didn't know how to run a TV station. Both of those are valuable things for the future. What they've led to is projects around a self-created video, partially for the cinema market and partially for other markets, where are learning how to become a creator of our own filmed media. Again, that's a different thing for a museum. We haven't done that before, but I think it's important that we do that as the TV market changes hugely, as it needs more documentary content, and it needs different people to make that. And I believe we can be part of the solution to helping make that content. Without that failure of the BT channel, we wouldn't know that now.
A question about organization. You just told us that publishing is part of your scope. Mm-hmm. Is it any kind of publishing, print to digital?
Yeah, so all publishing in the British Museum reports to me. I have a background in book publishing. I worked for HarperCollins in the UK, and I was a digital publisher there. So I happened to be in digital in the book industry when ebooks became a big thing. The book industry in the UK has fundamentally altered for the first time really in about 100 years in the last 5 years. Retailers have closed. Ebooks are now 40 to 50% of parts of the book market. Being a book publisher in the same way is going to change in the years ahead. Fundamentally, to me, being a book publisher is similar to being a blog publisher. It's about narrative storytelling through words and pictures. So aligning those things together so that the great editorial skills that help people tell stories through words and pictures can also tell stories in the words and pictures of digital channels, I think is a great thing for us to do as an organisation. So that's part of the change I've been putting in place there.
One of the new kind of digital activities you launched 1 year ago or 18 months was a feature film for theaters. Are you co-producer of these films? So do you take the risk, or you just partner? And
so we have produced 2 feature films in the last 2 years, one for our Pompeii exhibition and one for our Vikings exhibitions. Both of them have been relative successes. Both have been shown in more than 1,000 cinemas around the world. Both have been shown to great acclaim from box office. We have learnt that it is difficult to be a movie company. I think we knew that when we started, but we definitely know that from having done it. Yes, we have taken the financial risk in making those things.
So did you lose money on these 2?
Yeah. But again, valuable money to learn along the way. All these things are a process of adaptation and evolution. The live cinema market for the arts is 5% of UK box office now. But at the same time last year, 188 different productions were released from the National Theatre, from the Royal Opera House, from the Tate. Everybody is releasing these movies for only 5% of total box office. So it is a challenge. But again, do I believe the British Museum brand and the stories we can tell around our collection are of interest to audiences around the world? Absolutely. So that's about evolving the business model, the distribution model, the production model to find a viable business from that, and that's what we're in the process of doing.
Question.
Hello, thank you for your intervention. I'm working at Musée d'Ali in Paris. We are talking about success and failure. How do you measure the efficiency of all the things that you do at the British Museum? How do you know that it comes from the digital area, although it's a whole? But how do you, with the big budget that you've got, how do you measure the return on investment?
Everything that I do is driven around those three KPIs I mentioned at the beginning. What are we doing in terms of reach? What are we doing to build relationships? And what are we doing to build our income? If you can measure on those three lines, if you're building your income, you're building profit, and you can see growth of that over time. If you're building your relationships, you can count those number of relationships. And if you're building reach, you can count the size of audience you've gone. Museums are quite complex from a financial point of view. I've learnt this in the last year. Money comes from many different places, goes to many different places. I will allow the financial departments to manage that complexity in the best way possible. I want to be able to talk in the simplest way possible. So simply thinking against those three KPIs as a whole and on an individual project basis is core to me. One thing I'd say alongside that is it's three KPIs. Often you should only perform against one KPI. And identifying at the beginning of a project whether you are worrying most about building reach, whether you are worrying most about building relationships, or whether you're worrying most about building revenue is a very, very fundamental thing. Because the things that make money may not be the things that reach the largest audiences. They shouldn't be. Because if someone is paying for something, it will be a smaller number of people who will pay for it. That's fine. But just recognise at the start which of those things you care about most. It's a process for business planning in my department to make my team understand that. Laura understands that. But to make sure everyone can understand that, so they don't just try and map three great objectives for all three KPIs. Choose one KPI. Really go for that KPI. Make it deliver as strongly as you can. And then I think everyone can realise how well you're doing your job at that point.
Hi. Ariane Sampson from Canal Gates. For the pieces that are still protected under intellectual property rights and pieces that are owned by private owners, do you encounter good collaboration with them? Do you have any difficulties? How do you handle that?
The British Museum is lucky in many ways that most of our collection is not under copyright. This gives us incredible freedom to do whatever we want. For the bits that do, one of the core things I have introduced as a member of staff is someone who is an intellectual property manager. A museum that hasn't focused very strongly on copyright because it hasn't needed to, needs more sophistication in how it thinks about that space and make sure that the rights are managed and applied in the right way. And again, in a digital universe, how rights work is changing enormously. The rights definitions that you will see in contracts as they change over time will change massively, substantially and structurally. And so having someone who really understands that and can work with all the different departments, stakeholders, to make sure that fundamentally we do not breach copyright law on a day-to-day basis and that our partners are happy and that we are happy is a core of that. And then being able to collaborate on a proper relationship with our partners can then work from that. But again, fundamentally, 98% of our collection has no copyright because it's 5,000 years old. That makes it a bit easier.
You explained that in the team you are creating now, you try to have fresh profile from outside the museum. How do you try also to establish connection or cooperation with startup, with private companies to do new projects?
Get out and talk to people. I think anyone who manages digital in a museum will have seen many startups coming from some sectors of the technology market. You mentioned Bluetooth beacons. I think I've had about 100 different Bluetooth startups try and have a meeting with me in the last year. Some may be brilliant, some may be awful. It's very hard to tell. But listening to the startup market who want to have meetings with you and taking the time to do that, I think is a very important thing, because somewhere in that morass of startup culture is one brilliant thing that will help you out. And if you don't talk to 100 of them, you might not find the one brilliant thing, unfortunately. Also, go and talk to the big technology companies. Increasingly, Google, we know, are interested in this space. The Cultural Institute, the Art Project, they're a structured way of understanding what museums can be, for them trying to understand what museums can be. They do want to talk to you. They want to spend time with you to understand your organisations, so talk to them. I know Google are people rightly fear Google in many ways, but also use that fear to turn it into good things. I would say the same though, don't just talk to Google. Talk to Apple, talk to Facebook. These again are organisations who are changing the world at scale, for better or worse. It's not for me to judge whether they're a good thing or a bad thing, and I can simply say, if I want to reach the most people on the internet, well, Google run most of the internet. Facebook are trying to run the internet. Amazon increasingly run most of the commercial services right around the world. If I do not engage with those people properly and understand what I can use them for to my advantage, then nobody will. Because the thing with those guys is they don't need us. They don't need the museum sector, so if we don't talk to them, they'll ignore us. And if we don't talk to them, we then deserve to be ignored. So it is up to us to take responsibility to understand them. There are good people in all those companies who genuinely have good intentions for what museums can do in their spaces. Talk to them. See what you can do. See what makes sense for both of you.
Are you part of Google Art Project?
Not yet.
Oui.
Watch this space.
In terms of relation with companies or startup, could you imagine to do what some museums are doing, like New Museum, who set up an incubator, or friend from Gaieté Lyrique who welcome companies to work with you, to work with your team, to work with your collection?
Yeah, I think there's unquestionably a path there for that. The challenge with incubation, and I worked with the BBC when they incubated startups in the media space. The challenge is how to turn that incubation into something that's practically and has value, both for you and for them. I ran a startup. I've spent much time with venture capitalists. What startups really need is money, most of the time. And money is the one thing museums don't have to give to startups. So really, if that's going to take place, really work out if it can be genuinely of value to you. Because often, I think the challenge is we have large-scale structural challenges to answer. Having an incubator startup doesn't probably answer those challenges. So we have to get the core of what we're trying to do right. If we have time to incubate startups alongside it, brilliant. Your museum is in fantastic shape if you're in that position. I'm not in that position as an organisation. I've got a lot of things I need to change. So incubating startups is something we can do when we've really got everything working right. Yeah.
One of the company who is attending the conference and who is member of Click has worked with you in the past. It's a French company, so it means that it's an IMA solution, and they did something about MOMI, I think, and we'll see something about some of their work during the lunch. It means that you also work with foreign companies.
We are a museum of and for the world. We just happen to have British in our name. Ben from IMA has done incredible things with us. There is, over there. Has done incredible things with the museum over a sustained period of time. I think what IMA does as a technology and services provider is incredible for the museum space. To understand these objects in a way we've never understood them before, and to be able to show that to the public, amazing. I'm sure Ben will show you some of the way that's evolving from being big stuff you could only show on big interactive screens to things you can show on mobiles. Again, that journey of very complicated 3D content to being able to be something you can use on a mobile device is a very, very powerful one for the museum to help people understand objects at the point of contact with that object.
Question? Alors, en attendant qu'il y ait une question, moi j'en ai une. Vous avez you have a strong partnership with Samsung, 5 years I think. You have just renewed it. How does it work? Such a partnership? Do they give you money? Is it a co-conception of the things you can do together? And do you have other strong partner like this, like Samsung?
I can't speak about the specific terms of our relationship with Samsung, but they are a strong partner for us, both in our Samsung Digital Discovery Centre, which is an education space for young people. They have also been a partner for us around the use of screens in the museum. We have amazing video plinth screens and other screens around the museum that have been put there in partnership with Samsung. And they've also been an exhibition sponsorship partner for Ancient Lives, which is the exhibition that Ema worked on, which put visualizations of the inside of mummies into our galleries for the first time. And we have worked with them in all those contexts. I would say broadly, and not specifically about Samsung, but broadly, the relationship of sponsors to museums as they become kind of technology partners and digital partners will change. Historically, you were really selling branding rights, the right for a logo to be used in connection to a museum audience. That will change. Of course, that changes as you work with a technology partner who have both technology, software, and services that they can provide alongside that simple historic thing of capital. So we have to think, all of us have to think how that changes over time, and to make the dialogue around that kind of commercial work different from how it was. Before, you used to pitch ideas to a sponsor and they would give you money for your idea that you then turn into reality. You can't work with technology companies like that. You have to have a dialogue with them to find between you what the best opportunity is, because simply technology is very complicated and they understand their technology better than you do. So talking together to find what the solution can be that's mutually beneficial has to start. So it's a slightly different way of working that will emerge from that. And that's no different for Samsung than it would be for anyone else in this space.
I read in your last annual report that physically you get 6.8 million visitors not last year, but your last annual report year, and you get 35.3 million virtual visitors. Are you interested to know how you make a virtual visitor to become a physical visitor? If you are interested by this shift, how do you measure it? And do you have some results of this shift?
Again, I'm just at the beginning of a process of learning of measuring everything. The museum should measure everything and see how everything joins together. What I want to know, what I do know now, as I said, the audience looks at the website twice before they come to the British Museum. What I want to understand is exactly the dynamics of that behaviour and how they convert to the different things they can do there. The free services we offer, how they think about what parts of the collection they're going to visit, how they decide whether to purchase a multimedia guide, whether to purchase a guidebook, whether to go to an exhibition and pay for that ticket. All of that is a complex series of behaviours, but understanding all of that and going for that piece thing from the people who think about coming to converting them to helping them to do the things that's most meaningful for them as a visitor, absolutely crucial part for this. Laura is in charge of that.
Good luck. Maybe a last question for me. I hope that there will be a last question in the audience. This morning we spoke about the value of cultural things, which is decreasing on internet, and we spoke about how can we monetize the digital activities of the museum. How do you do when you today at British Museum temporary exhibitions are paid and permanent collections are free? How do you do for digital tools? Are they always free, for example the apps you launch, or sometimes you decide to do pay app or pay services?
Historically, we have always offered paid. Our model for mobile historically has been about device rental-led services. So as you come to a temporary exhibition, as you come to the gallery, the main collection, you will hire a device on which is a mobile tour. You pay for the device, access to that, the headphones, and then for the content of that tour. I don't doubt that all of that will start to unbundle, to expand over time, so that you have both that device rental model, which is very, very valuable revenue for the museum and gives you a chance to make sure people are doing the right thing when they're accessing that content, to also include free apps, to also include a whole range of potentially freemium and other services alongside. Do I think there's a generic financial model for how that works? Absolutely not. I've released 60 or 70 apps in my career so far. I have always been much better at giving them away for free than getting people to pay for them, and that's everyone's experience who's ever made apps. And the space of how you convert people to paying for apps is a very, very complicated one. We are not a games company. Games companies have many, many thousands of brilliant mechanisms for getting people to pay for stuff. We do not have that. I would say fundamentally, if the museum sector looks to paid apps as the future of its commercial revenue, it is going to have a very big set of problems to encounter. I do not believe paid apps are going to solve our business problems in the years ahead. But I believe actually through doing digital well, we can sell more tickets, we can sell more memberships, we can sell more stuff from our e-commerce services, we can help people buy more of the things that they broadly need, and we can be better at the tickets off the way we sell tickets. We can be better at some of those membership services. We can do those commercial offers better than we do. Commercial digital paid products is a hard road to go down, and that market's not getting easier, it's getting harder as it evolves.
Last question, dernière question. We are lucky because Chris will stay with us for lunch, for the networking session, and Chris has accepted to be chairman of our prize ceremony at 5. Thanks a lot. And so vous allez avoir la possibilité de pouvoir parler avec Chris pendant le déjeuner. On est exactement à 5 minutes près à l'heure. Je voudrais juste vous demander de rester assis pendant 3 minutes. On a parlé des films dans les salles, les films d'exposition et de musées. Pour la première fois, un musée français va avoir son film diffusé dans les salles de cinéma. C'est le musée du Luxembourg, donc le musée géré par l'ARMN Grand Palais. Un projet monté par l'ARMN Grand Palais en partenariat avec un producteur. Le film sortira le 25 ou 26 mai dans 53 pays. C'est le film de l'exposition impressionniste et on va vous montrer en avant-première la bande-annonce du film qui va être mise en ligne pour le marketing du film à partir de demain ou après-demain.